Hello everyone! How is everyone doing out there today? It's Wednesday again. These weeks just seem to fly by at the moment, don't they? So how are you all doing out there today? Today we're going to have a bit of a talk about riffs. So I've been posting on socials this week just to gauge what your favourite riffs are. We all love riffs, and riffs is something that, guitar players always end up talking about. So I thought that's what we would talk about tonight on the stream. So who is here already in the chat? Hello, Dennis. Hey, all from Tulsa. I didn't know you were from Tulsa, Dennis. That's really cool to know. Let me know how the audio sounds tonight as well, guys. If you need more or less of anything, let me know as always in the chat. So yeah, riffs, guitar riffs. I thought we'd just have a talk about all of our favourite riffs tonight because I get asked a lot, both just, on a personal level as a player, but also as a teacher as well, when I'm teaching students or via my guitar course or wherever else I'm sort of teaching. People always ask me questions about either what my favourite riffs are or what kind of riffs I learned when I started. What riffs are good for beginners, what riffs are good for, advanced players, everything riff-based. So tonight would be a really cool night to talk about those things. So I can see Peter Grant is in the chat as well. Evening all, my favourite riffs that I can play are Zeppelin's Black Dog and Ian Deary's Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. Some good riff collections there. Black Dog is a really cool riff. That was one of my favourites when I was growing up. I spent a lot of hours learning that one, and there's a couple of cool things we can talk about with that riff as well that always trip people up. The picture's slightly out of focus. Let me check that. Anyone else getting any focus issues? Seems okay my end, but let me just make 100% sure. But if anyone else is having picture issues, let me know. Peter, it could be that YouTube has defaulted to a lower quality of stream. So in the bottom of your screen, if you're watching on a computer or on your phone, there might be in the top corner, there'll be a settings icon and you can change the quality of the stream there. If the picture is slightly blurry, they might have, for some reason, defaulted you to a lower quality stream. They do that sometimes. So who else is in the chat? Anton. Hey Anton, how are you doing? Quicksilver, catching a quick one from Naples. Ah, you're on the road then. So usually you're in the Czech Republic, I think, is where we established last time. So Naples, that's a bit of a change. Holiday, or, are you enjoying it out there? I've never been to Naples. Ryan, Bark at the Moon. Oh, that's a great riff. That's a really cool riff. And what's up? Not much, Ryan. Thank you for asking. How are you? Hope you're doing very good today. Anton likes the Billy Gibbons riffs. Yeah, Billy Gibbons is just a bit of a riff master, isn't he? ZZ Top, as a band, are one of those bands that are criminally underrated as songwriters and musicians. I think whenever people think of ZZ Top, they think of, the big beards and the sort of the pink fluffy guitars from the 80s. But there's actually a lot of really cool stuff in the ZZ Top back catalogue, especially if you dig into the 60s stuff. I always loved, obviously everyone knows, the Grange. Bit of drive would help. Everyone knows that riff. But I love some of the more obscure, or not obscure, but, 70s rock things, like Tush is always a cool riff. It's essentially just a sort of pumped up 12-bar blues, but it's a really fun riff to play, really fun song to play at that. I've got a lot of time for the Billy Gibbons riffs. Dennis says, great sound and video. Okay, well, if anyone else has any audio or video issues, let me know, and we'll troubleshoot as we go along. Dave Murray and Adrian Smith harmony riffs. Yeah, there's too many to choose from there, isn't there? So for me, growing up, Adrian Smith was one of my absolute favourite. It still is one of my favourite players. And I'm actually playing the Adrian Smith Signature Jackson today. So yeah, Adrian was a huge influence on me when I was growing up. I remember spending a lot of time trying to sort of perfect some of those Adrian Smith style riffs when I was younger. I mean, obviously one thing I said I was going to talk about was some of my favourite riffs, and of course there's some Adrian Smith riffs in there. I always loved 2 Minutes to Midnight. That was one of my sort of big favourite Maiden tracks when I was growing up, because I just loved the aggression of that riff. Always loved that sound. Adrian and Dave were sort of the foundations of a lot of my guitar playing, especially Adrian. When I was learning guitar, like I said, I spent hours just, you know, chasing and emulating the Adrian Smith thing. The first proper guitar solo I ever learned was the Adrian Smith solo from The Trooper as well. So yeah, he's always been a huge influence on me. So yeah, I'm glad to see someone else throwing his name in the chat over there. So yeah, Peter Grant said Black Dog as well. That's an interesting one, because I remember when I first tried to learn that one, I was a huge Zeppelin fan when I was younger. I'm still a huge Zeppelin fan now, but again, Jimmy Page was one of those players that just kind of, I just used to find his playing so fascinating, because he was doing the blues rock thing, but not quite to the, you know, the standard formula that everyone else was doing. And Black Dog was one of the tracks that really kind of showed that off. Because for anyone who hasn't learned Black Dog, there's a couple of weird little intricacies in that riff. And Peter might have recalled some of these from when he was learning it as well. It's one of those riffs that you think you've got it, and then there's like a note here or there that will just catch you out. I mean, that in itself is a busy riff. There's a lot of notes going on in that. And if you don't know the track, it's a really cool song with some insanely difficult to lock into grooves. It's a really fun one for guitar players. But there's a very particular point of that riff that for years I just couldn't work out how to play it properly. And it's basically because there's one note that falls in when you don't expect it to. So in the track, there's like a call and response thing between that riff and the vocals. And then it goes into this sort of sub groove where it goes. So there's one note in that little kind of chromatic thing. That note right there, that final D note, if you miss that note, the transition back into the main riff just doesn't work. And when I first learnt it, all the tabs on the internet basically were wrong, and none of them actually had that note in. So I couldn't work out how to get back to the main riff. I remember sort of the early stages of me playing that, it was always like with a gap there, because I just couldn't work out where that note was. That was wrong. That one note just sort of sets you up to go back into the groove. And yeah, Peter, I'm sure you remember that from when you learned it, because it's a tricky one. It's very groove orientated. You have to just nail that note at just the right point, and that's something that Jimmy Page was just the master of doing. There's not many guys that could groove like Page. Quicksilver, can't think of one favourite riff, but so many off the top of my head. Double Talk and Jive. Yeah, Guns N' Roses, again, insane amounts of riffs. You know, you could probably fill, you know, a top 20 riffs with cool Guns N' Roses riffs. There's some great riffs on the Use Your Illusion albums, but my favourite Guns N' Roses riff, if I was going to go down the Guns N' Roses rabbit hole, it's got to be My Michelle. I always loved the simplicity of the riff, but also there's kind of a power to the big chords as well. I love the way it always just kind of creeps in. And then you've got those big power chords. That That was always my favourite Slash riff. But yeah, there's so many. You could go down the rabbit hole with Slash. It's, again, the groove. There's a groove to Guns N' Roses that, you know, you're not just playing... It's not just kind of straight power chords that are dragged down. There's like a groove to... That's the thing that makes the Guns N' Roses riffs super cool and just really impressive, I think, is that just that underpinning groove. I think that, for me, is a big part of all the riffs I like. I love groove in a riff. Like, I was a big Aerosmith fan growing up, Zeppelin. Anyone with a bit of groove, I think, is just iconic. There's just something about a good classic rock riff with some groove in it that just really gets you excited, I think. Went out on full screen and then back in, and the picture cleared up. Ah, maybe it's that then. So yeah, cool. I'm glad that's cleared up for you now, Peter. Yeah, it's easy to miss that note, and it does really, really mess the timing up. Yeah, it's a nightmare of a note. You wouldn't think that one note could have such an impact on such a busy riff, but that one note does really throw you out, I think. Yeah, took me a long time to get my head around that one when I first learned it. Aerosmith, Sweet Emotion, yeah, we just had a shout out there for Aerosmith from Quicksilver. I was a huge fan of Joe Perry. I keep saying was. I am a huge fan of Joe Perry. I love, again, it's the groove thing. It's that Zeppelin-y, bluesy groove that Joe Perry has. Sweet Emotion is such a cool riff. Is it in... Yeah, that's the one. Such a cool riff. There's so much groove and sort of energy in that riff, even though there's not a huge amount of notes. There's just still that really powerful groove to it. So Aerosmith are always in my top sort of, if I was going to name 10 riffs, there's always going to be an Aerosmith riff in there. So yeah, we'll talk about some Aerosmith as well. More Guns N' Roses, Mr. Brownstone, yeah, another cool but busy. There's a lot of notes in that riff. Krenar is here as well. Hey Krenar, how are you doing? Good to see you. What's your favourite riff, Krenar? We're talking riffs today. I know, obviously, anyone who doesn't know Krenar, he's a great jazz player, but he's also just a great guitar player in general, and he's probably going to have some really cool, interesting riffs to share with us as well. So yeah, what's your favourite riff, Krenar? I'd be really interested to find out what that is. And Harry Scott Elliott is here as well. Hey Harry, how are you doing? It's good to see you here. I don't think I've seen you on one of the streams before. Now, there's a guy who can... find his way around a couple of notes on a fretboard. Harry's a great guitar player. He is a disciple of Paul Gilbert. So if you want to hear someone who can really shred, Harry's a good guy to talk to about shred guitar, because he can play. So yeah, Tooth and Nail by Dokken. That's a cool one. Dokken are a band I never got into that much, and I was speaking to someone about this the other day, and I always loved... I mean, obviously, anyone who knows me, I'm a huge fan of the 80s thing. I love all the 80s bands, all the hair metal bands and the 80s rock. But Dokken are probably the one band that just slipped off my radar. Not for any real reason, other than I think I just didn't really like the guy's voice. And I think that's really the thing that stopped me kind of clicking with Dokken. Yeah, that's... I want to like them, but there's just something that doesn't click for me. Have you heard Adrian Smith playing Stevie Ray stuff? There's a video on YouTube of him doing warm-ups playing Stevie Ray. Yeah, Adrian is a much more versatile guitar player than a lot of people realise, I think, because he's always been in Iron Maiden. You kind of associate him as being a metal guitar player. But Adrian's style is very much rooted in the blues rock thing. I actually saw him in a really small, like, I guess we'd call it a bar in a town called Bristol. Oh, my camera's died. One sec, guys. My camera's decided to switch itself off. And it's back. I need to look into that. My camera has started doing this thing where it keeps switching itself off, and I don't know why. Yeah, I saw Adrian Smith play in, I guess what we would call a bar in a town called Bristol last week I went to see him with his sort of side band, Smith and Kotzen. And a lot of what he played through that show was just very bluesy, sort of, you know, pentatonic-y rock stuff. He does the Stevie Ray thing incredibly well, because I think that's sort of the backbone of his playing style. I don't think he's a guitar player who sort of came from the idea of being a shred guy. I think he developed some of the technical stuff, but the backbone of what he does is very much, you know, blues rock and those iconic sort of guitar sounds, really. So yeah, I think I've seen that video. But yeah, what a player. One of my favourites by a long shot. Crenard's favourite riff is Killing in the Name. Ah, okay, that's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that from you. Only because I know Crenard, so I know that he's a huge jazz player and a lot of his playing style is very kind of smooth and silky. I would not have put you down as a rage guy though. That's really interesting, but very cool. I've never heard you play anything like that as well. I think I'd really like to hear you actually playing that kind of stuff, because I think it's different to your usual approach to guitar. So I would definitely like to see how you tackle that as well. That would be really cool, I think. Chris Batten, Canons had overheating issues switching them off all the time. Yeah, that's... I am using a Canon. I've had the issue before, but today I've literally only turned it on in time for the stream. So it's only been on about 20 minutes, and usually I would shoot with it for hours and hours before that happens. To be honest, I think it's the battery adapter that I'm using. I'm using one of those sort of plug-in batteries. I think that's what's causing the problem. So I think I need to look into that before I go and replace my camera. But yeah, all cameras are temperamental. I think Tony Iommi, Paranoid, and Master of Reality were really great. Cut my teeth on those two. Yeah, Tony Iommi, well, he's sort of the godfather of the riff, isn't he? Tony's got so many cool riffs. One thing I always talk to new guitar players about, like when I'm teaching new students or people who've just started playing, they always ask for easy riffs. And I always recommend some Sabbath stuff. Either, you know, Iron Man, always a classic, or stuff like Paranoid, because you just do those sort of 2-string power chords. And you can have so much fun playing those kind of riffs as well. They're not super demanding, and I think anyone can just have fun with those Iommi riffs. Paranoid is always a great one, because you've got the added technicality of the hammer-ons as well, especially for new players. And then obviously we just got the power chords. So yeah, plenty of Iommi stuff is always cool to learn as well. Yeah, I didn't spend too much time learning Iommi stuff when I was younger, but I kind of gained a sort of, again, I'm choosing my words here, because I was never a huge Iommi fan when I was first getting into guitar, because he was a little bit too on the heavy side for me. But where I did really connect with his stuff is the first 2 Sabbath albums, before they became super sort of sludgy and sort of heavy. I was really into the early stuff, like The Wizard, for instance, off the first album, the very kind of bluesy, rootsy sort of Sabbath stuff. That stuff really struck a chord with me. But then when they sort of went into the heavier stuff, I kind of lost interest a little bit. But again, you can't ever overlook the genius that Tony Iommi is. He really is a riff master. Such a classic. It is rusty. It is a classic. I think Iommi's just come up with so many iconic riffs over the years. He's one of those players you could probably fill a book with iconic Iommi riffs, I think. You have so many guitars. I have 2. I have a problem. That's what I have, Harry. You must have sold some of the ones that I've known from your collection then, because obviously I remember you having a Les Paul and a red Fender Strat. I'm pretty sure it was red, wasn't it? And you had I can't remember the Les Paul colour, but I remember you had a Les Paul when we first met all those years ago. long time ago. I didn't know you only had 2 these days though. I thought you still would have had the oldies. But yeah, I just have a problem. I just have an addiction to buying guitars. I think it's a bit of a problem for space. Space is a premium in our house, but there's worse things I could spend my money on. I think. I don't know. I think so anyway. I sold a few. That Fender is lime green now. Lime green. Wow. I don't think I've seen it since it was. Was it a Showmaster? It wasn't a typical Strat, was it? It wasn't just like a regular Stratocaster. I'm sure it had something different about it. It was like a special edition something, I think. I do remember that guitar quite well though. I use comparison now. Of course you do, yeah. Of course you use those. I keep forgetting that you're a comparison guy now. I've still never played one. I know a bunch of people who do play, you obviously you included. I know a bunch of people who do play them and love them, but I've never actually tried one myself. They've just never come across my radar before. And from what I can see online, they're fantastic value for money as well, because they're not the most expensive guitars. They're not cheap by any stretch, but they're not sort of $4,000 plus. But apparently they are great. So yeah, I'll have to try one day, because I am quite into the Super Strats again at the moment. I sort of went away from Super Strats for a while because I got fed up with Floyd Rose tremolos, but I've kind of come home a little bit again now, hence I'm playing one today. They feel similar to Ibanez. Okay, that's interesting. Because one thing I like Ibanez guitars, but I prefer Ibanez guitars with fatter necks. Some of them are a little bit too thin for my taste. I do like guitars with a bit more substance in the neck. But yeah, I would still be interested in trying one though. That Shergold guitar back there looks nice. Yeah, that's a great one, Cronard. That's a guitar I think you'd really enjoy. It's a sort of, I don't know, Telly Les Paul hybrid, because it's got the Telly sort of bridge setup, humbucker P90, but you can split the humbucker into a single as well. So yeah, it's sort of like, it kind of sounds like a Les Paul, but it sort of behaves a bit like a Telly as well. Very, very versatile, even though it's only got 2 pickups. It's kind of got the same vibe as like the PJD stuff. Obviously, you know, Seymour Duncan instead of bare knuckle pickups, but it's, funnily enough, the guys at PJD are obviously building the new Billy Gibbons models, and this is actually the Billy Gibbons Seymour Duncan, so it kind of has the same vibe as PJD guitars. And they're around the same price point. I think the Shergolds are slightly cheaper as well. That Jackson is beautiful. Yeah, I love this Jackson. Again, not an expensive guitar. These retail like $450-ish, I think. They're very, very affordable, but for the money, they're insanely good. This is probably, at the moment, the guitar I'm playing the most right now. I've always said that the bridge pickup on this is a little underwhelming. It's not a bad pickup, but it's not the best pickup. So if I was going to change anything, I'd probably put a new bridge pickup in it. But other than that, the guitar is great. Thoughts on a Steinberger headless guitar as a travel guitar? Or no chance 280s? Now, there's no such thing as 280s. The more 80s, the better. But I just don't like headless guitars. I love 80s though. Anything 80s, and I am a huge fan of. But yeah, the Steinberger thing, I don't like the visual look of a headless guitar. I've played a few headless guitars, and especially some of the new Ibanez ones, and they're insanely good guitars to play, but there's just something really weird about not having a headstock. For me, I just can't work it out, because I'm used to seeing the guitar go beyond this point, and it kind of feels weird to me to go this far up the neck and then that be the end of the neck, you know, like if you go past the first fret there's nothing. So it's a bit weird for me, but I understand they have a place and a lot of players like them. I personally just don't like the visuals of them, but as a travel guitar, nothing wrong with that. It could work very well as a travel guitar. Another really cool travel guitar, if you don't want the headless thing, is the Black Star, I think it's called the Carry-On guitar. These are probably about the same price point, but they're built more like a sort of a Les Paul-y style. I think it's like a 21-inch scale, so it sort of feels like a slimmed down Les Paul, but they made the neck the same dimensions as a full-size neck. It's just a shorter scale. So it feels like playing a full-size guitar, but you're actually playing a much shorter guitar as well. Harry is off. Great to finally catch you live. Stay safe. We'll have to have a catch-up soon, Harry. It's been too long, and yeah, we should get on video together at some point and talk 80s guitar players, because we're both big 80s fans. And Harry has very kindly sent a super chat as well, so thank you very much, Harry. That's very, very much appreciated. Stay safe, and we'll catch up very, very soon. Dennis, I pulled the trigger on a lefty Squier Affinity this week before the 2020 sells out. Everything has changed with them. I wanted the vintage tremolo and all. The Squier Affinity stuff has come on so much since I started playing, especially. I remember when I was a new guitar player, like 20 years ago, the Squier Affinity stuff was sort of seen as the bottom of the barrel, basically. It was like, how cheap can you get Squier Affinity? And now they're making guitars that for less than £200 you can take out and play. I don't know if anyone has seen this video, but I did a series of videos from the tail end of 2020 up until the middle of last year with this guitar, which is a Squier Bullet. And the Bullet is sort of the, I guess, the step below the Affinity. It's the bottom of the sort of Squier pile. And the whole point of the video was to see, this is like £140 guitar. And what I did was I sourced or bought new everything other than the wood of the guitar to see how far you can push a cheap guitar. So it's got new pickups, new electronics, new Strat buttons. I even went that far. I put lock and tuners on it, a new nut. Literally everything is new other than the wood on the body and the bridge, only because the Bullet Strats are thinner than a regular Strat, so a regular Strat bridge would protrude out the back. But I literally took the wood of this guitar and rebuilt it with everything else just to see how good the core guitar is, and they're actually great guitars. I haven't actually gigged this yet, but it's good enough that I would gig it, and yeah, it was quite a fun project. But I think the Squier Affinity stuff and like the Squier Bullet stuff, I think these guys are really doing the right thing for the budget market. I think that just because a guitar is affordable these days, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And I think that's a really interesting conversation, because as players, the options are better than ever now. I don't think anyone can get a bad guitar anymore unless you go like super cheap. But yeah, Squier Affinity is great, and if you wanted to step up from that, you'd have the Squier Classic Vibe as well, which are great. Those are like a little bit more pricey, but also great guitars for the money. Tried any 80s Fernandez? I have a Has FRT, which is very smooth. I don't think I have tried any 80s Fernandez. My 80s guitar radar is always scanning for more and more 80s things, but I've not actually tried any of the 80s Fernandez yet. I've tried the slightly more modern ones when they sort of had that resurgence in like 2008, when the guy from Velvet Revolver started using them. They had, was it the Fernandez Revel? The one that was sort of like half Les Paul, half something else. That guitar was quite cool. I tried one of those and I quite liked that. But yeah, I'd like to try some of their 80s stuff. Anton, cheers, we'll look up the Black Star. The Black Star Carry On is a cool guitar if you're looking for something small to carry around with you. I did a demo on it at the start of last summer, so it's on the channel somewhere. If you search Black Star Carry On guitar, you'll find the video I did on it, and there's a bunch of videos on the Black Star YouTube channel of me using it as well. It's just a really fun guitar as well. I think they nailed the line between practicality and fun, because some travel guitars, literally feel like travel guitars and they feel like toys. But they've actually designed a travel guitar that feels like a real guitar and plays and sounds good as well. So it's a little bit more expensive than the average travel guitar. I think they're like about £300 in the UK. But if you want a guitar that's a travel guitar that you can actually enjoy playing, I think it's a good compromise. Crenard, it's a visual thing that definitely tricks your mind. I get confused on having a 7-string on my lap. Don't talk to me about 7 strings. 7 strings cook my brain even more. I got caught out at Gear Street last year. I was doing a video on an Engel amp with Trey Xavier from the Gear Gods channel, and he hands me a 7-string Ibanez with fanned frets. And yeah, that I could not get my head around where anything was, because not only were the frets not straight, but there was an extra string to contend with. And yeah, 7 strings, I can't. You'd think it would be easy. You'd think, okay, there's just an extra low string. But it's another thing completely. Like, you've got this extra string, and it just confuses. For me, I can't work it out. It's like, what is this extra string and why is it here? It completely throws out all my reference points, I think. So yeah, very strange. Funny, started with a Bullet in the early 80s, quite bad, loved it anyway. Yeah, the Bullets have come a long way since then. The 80s was sort of the point, I guess, where Squier were really kind of, I guess, pushing that real entry-level price point in the market. So yeah, it's good to see that they've come a long way since then. I think entry-level and budget guitars in general have come a long way. Even just in, I mean, even in the 20 years I've been playing, I've seen a huge difference in what you can get for your money. So I can imagine if you go wider with that on a bigger scale, yeah, the difference is a 9-day. I did the same with my Squier Standard Series Strat, and they're all gone now, selling for 700 plus. Yeah, the Standard Series Squier Strats, the 80s ones, especially if you can get the Japanese ones, those go for silly money now. I've actually seen a few people in the UK selling them for like £1,000, which for you in the States would be like probably closer to like $1,200–1,300. Yeah, they do go for really good money, or big money even. Sorry, haha, HSS. So alright, I got it now. So you had a humbucker single guitar. Yeah, I'm really interested in trying something from the 80s Fernandez range, if possible. Are the Squier CV Strats thinner bodies too? Oh, that's a good question. The CV guitars, those are actually the ones we were just speaking about, the 80s Japanese ones. I think those are regular size. I may be mistaken, but I think they might be. They might be fine. I'm pretty sure, off the top of my head, the only guitars that Squier swapped out the body sizes for was the Bullet stuff, because the Bullet ones were designed for younger players, so they slimmed them down a bit. Same, they did it with the Bullet Tellies as well. They just thinned them out a bit to obviously make them a bit more accessible for younger guitar players. If Jeffrey uses it, it's legit. Anything Jeffrey does is legit. Jeffrey is the authority on things. I miss hearing that guy abuse people. I hope hopefully we get to see him this year. There's so many more alternatives for inexpensive, well-made guitars. Yeah, there is. It's no question these days that you can get a great guitar for, you know, £200 to £250. Whereas when I started playing, you had to spend at least 3 times that to get something that would be, you know, decent. But then really you had to go up to sort of, you know, near enough £1,000 to get a pro level guitar. Granted, the goalposts have moved a lot now, because I remember when I was young, a Gibson Les Paul Standard was classed as the working guitar, and that was like £1,200 in the UK, and now they're easily close to £2,500. So yeah, they're not so much in the working price point anymore. The Classic Vibes have regular measurements. Sorry, I meant the Classic Vibe, not the 80s JVs. Okay, well there we are. There's that question answered there for Anton. Crenard's come to the rescue there. The Classic Vibes have regular measurements, because Crenard has a Classic Vibe, and I always forget that. That's you've got the Telly, haven't you, I believe? My Squier was smaller, only 2 controls, 1 volume, 1 tone. Oh yeah, I remember those ones. Because the bullet strats, these new bullet strats are actually slightly different to what the bullet strat used to be. I do actually remember when bullet strats were literally just 1 volume, 1 tone. And then obviously at some point they decided, okay, let's make these a little bit more like a proper strat now for people to have an affordable strat. Good evening from Germany. Hey, how's it going? Nice of you to join us. How is everything in Germany at the moment? I like Germany. I've spent a lot of time there over the last few years. And yeah, Germany's a great country. I do have a lot of time for that place. It's always good fun in Germany. Got to shoot a lot of videos in Germany as well, which is always fun. It's just, yeah, such a fun place. But yeah, we've actually kind of gone off track a little bit here, haven't we? We've gone down the guitar rabbit hole a bit. So let's go back to riffs before we go into another rabbit hole, because we can go into rabbit holes as well. It's always fun. But let's talk about riffs again. So I put out a post the other day on socials, and I know there's a few more people in the chat now that weren't here earlier. I put out a post on Instagram asking people what their favourite riffs were. And riffs, like I said at the start of the stream, is something we talk about a lot as guitar players. I get asked a lot as a guitar teacher as well about easy riffs and people's favourite riffs. And people always ask me what my favourite riffs are as well. So I'm always interested to hear what other people's favourite riffs are. Yeah, it's just such a fun topic because riffs are kind of the thing that make us want to play guitar. And that's, I find really interesting talking about guitar types, because these days I sort of have riffs that I play on certain guitars as well, if that makes sense. So talking about strats, I'm instantly thinking of like my favourite strat riffs. And I can see now Cronal's talking about his telly, and I'm instantly thinking, oh, that would be great for Keith Richards kind of stuff. The Tone Hatch P90, I forgot you had the Tone Hatch P90 in that as well. That's really cool. I'm going to send it to a respected builder so he can make it perfect with the fretwork. That'll be cool. The fretwork's pretty good on those anyway. But yeah, it'll be really cool to see where he can take that. So yeah, while we're bouncing around a bunch of different guitar-based topics, I'm going to talk about some of my favourite riffs, because that's something I get asked all the time. So I've mentioned a few little bits and pieces, but I've not gone into a huge amount of detail about what riffs I really love. We've just talked about some bands earlier on in the stream. But one riff, whenever people ask me about my favourite riffs, one riff that I always talk about is the Aerosmith riff that Joe Perry plays on the track, and I should really know the track name, but for some reason it's eluding me right now. That's really bad. It's one of my favourite tracks and I've forgotten the riff, so I need to actually look the song name up, because Last Child. I always forget the name of that song, even though it's one of my favourite Aerosmith songs. And we were talking about groove earlier on in the stream, and there's this riff that Joe Perry plays in that song that's just got this really cool groove to it. That's really cool, but then the next riff is even cooler. I love that, just that pulse, that Joe Perry thing where he's sort of accenting. That's one of my favourite sounds with a riff. I love that kind of driving thing with it as well. I'm not sure Henning is representative. Henning is a great host. Anyone who spends any time in Germany with Henning will know it's hours of fun. The last time we were out there, and Cronal can vouch for this, I think we pretty much spent the 5 or 6 days we were there just laughing because it was so much fun. I'm surprised we actually got any work done because we just laughed for the whole of the whole time we were there. Just so much fun. It's always a great time. I kind of wish with Gear Street that we could film everything, because making the videos is so much fun, but it's just everything that goes on after that, it just kind of goes to another level with, you know, it's just, you lock 20 guitar players in a hotel for a week and it's going to be fun. You know, we just have such a good time together. So yeah, that's the stuff I wish we could film. Just the laughs and the jokes, because it's just so cool. And Henning is just the greatest guy to hang out with as well. He's so easygoing. No, he's not easygoing. He's a great guy to hang out with. But yeah, he's so fun. We always just spend so much time laughing. Riffs as hooks. Yeah, hooks, riffs, like the kind of things that, you know, hook us into a song. That was the sort of underlying sort of whole idea behind this live stream, is just to chat about riffs. And obviously we're always going to go off on little fun tangents from time to time, like talking about guitars, because that's, you know, we're guitar players. What else are we going to talk about? But yeah, riffs, I love the idea of finding out what people's favourite riffs are, because I speak to so many people about riffs on a regular basis, and it's just interesting to find out what makes people tick in that respect. Halder loves that Aerosmith riff too. Yeah, that's one of my favourites. I love most Aerosmith riffs, and I know they've come up a few times in the thread today. I just think Joe Perry's such a good riff writer. People always think, again, it's one of those things, you think of him as a lead player, but his riffs are just so much fun. He's just got this groove that he can just nail every time. And sometimes even just some of his busier riffs as well. Like, you have the track Eat the Rich, and there's this riff in the verse which if you listen to the track, you only kind of hear the main, like there's like this double stop line over the top, but underneath that there's this riff that goes, I haven't played this for a while. That's it. What an interesting riff, because he's just sort of playing that kind of thing, but he's pulling off to an open every time. What an interesting way to write a riff. I'd never think to write something like that myself. When I was growing up, it was all about bluesy riffs. Like, I know we talked about Black Dog earlier on. One of the riffs that I was obsessed with when I was growing up was the intro for the John Mayall and the Blues Breakers Stepping Out. When I figured out how to play that, it was just like, I'm going to play this 20 times a day. And now I can't play it because I haven't played it in a few weeks. That was one that just, all the time, on repeat for me, just playing the hell out of that riff. I was always a big fan of simplicity with riffs. I like some complex riffs. You know, when I was growing up, I learned a bunch of Iron Maiden and Metallica riffs and all those kind of bands. But really the riffs that kind of hit me the most were the ones that were just simple. Like Keith Richards, anything Keith Richards plays. Just that whole kind of Stonesy... I quite like guitar players that have that sort of disregard for technicality as well. Like, you can play Keith Richards like this. But it doesn't sound like Keith Richards. Where it sounds like Keith Richards is when you go... when you almost intentionally try and play it wrong. I think that's always the fun thing with getting the character of a riff as well. Like, other than like Maiden and Metallica, I was big into like hair metal stuff, so I was learning a lot of Poison riffs. Again, some really cool simple stuff there, but there's also some quite technical stuff. They always had riffs like they've got these busy kind of runs, which again, who would write that in a riff? You usually think of a riff being quite simple, but that's one of the more complex riffs I remember learning from when I was younger. Just so much fun. I always loved just hooks as well, though. I always loved catchy riffs. I was never interested in bands that are just playing 1,000 notes for the sake of playing them. It was more like, you know, give me 2 chords and something that sounds really cool. Megadeth, Trust is an underrated riff. See, Megadeth are a band that I'm not overly familiar with. I know the hits, but they're one of those bands that I didn't really go down the rabbit hole with. Mainly just, again, it's the voice thing. I didn't really click with Mustaine's voice. I always thought the riff for the track Hangar 18 was really cool. That was always like the one Megadeth riff that I sort of remember from when I was younger. I thought, I'm into that riff. I quite liked that it was quite melodic. And that's pretty much all I remember from it. But I remember learning that riff in one of the guitar magazines and quite liking that one. But as a band, I was more of a Metallica fan. Even though that kind of goes against what I was saying about the sort of music that I played growing up. I did play a lot of Metallica. Which was a bit of a standout, really, because most of my upbringing was, you know, Eric Clapton, Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Deep Purple. And then I kind of got into Maiden and the hair metal thing, but then somewhere in the middle I heard the Master of Puppets album and it was like, okay, I get this. I was quite into the whole that kind of playing style for a while when I was younger as well, but I didn't persevere as a metal guitar player. Maybe I should have. I love the bass riff of Magic Man by heart, especially after Tom B showed the way to do it without having to break your 2 high strings by tuning high. I don't know that one. I'll have to check that one out. Poison Tearing Down the Walls is another great riff. Yeah, that's a cool one. Nice to have another mention of Poison as well, even though I was just speaking about them there, Mark. I loved C.C. DeVille growing up. Again, just interesting riffs. He did that, again, it's the bluesy thing. There's a bluesiness to their riff style, even though they were a hair metal band. You had these riffs like Look What the Cat Dragged In. Which is essentially just a 12-bar blues, but played really aggressively. And I think that's why I kind of clicked with the 80s thing, was a lot of those bands were playing that 80s blues rock kind of thing, which I quite liked. I was a big fan of Def Leppard as well. Again, I keep using the term was a big fan, am a big fan. For some reason I'm talking in past tense today. The Def Leppard thing was always interesting to me as well because it's, again, simplicity. It's that whole... That's not it. If anyone can remember how to play Photograph, let me know, because I can't remember to play it. I always played it wrong. And that's still wrong. And one of my friends taught me how to play it properly, and now I've evidently forgotten how that was. Like that. All just played in a 2-fret box, but it's so simple and just so effective. That, for me, I guess, is really the underlying thing. I just love simplicity in a riff. One of my all-time favourite riffs was also Led Zeppelin. The riff from... I always forget the name of the track. The Lemon Song. I love that sort of alternating thing he does with the bass note and the 2 high strings, and then the big chord in the middle as well. That was always really fun to learn when I was younger. I think the first 4 Zeppelin albums were big for me with riffs, like those big... big kind of groovy rock riffs. Just love that growing up. I learned to play Photograph by one of your videos. Well, that's actually, that video is the correct way to play it. That was the video I did for Blackstar, actually, I think. And the guy that taught me how to play it properly was Steve, that does the product demos for Blackstar. And he was taught how to play it by Phil from Def Leppard, because he used to play it the wrong way as well. So, in a way, Phil from Def Leppard taught me how to play it through Steve, which is, I quite like that. I like that as an idea. Chordy riffs definitely work. Yeah, chordy riffs you can't go wrong with. Always a good place to start. It worked for AC/DC. AC/DC made a career out of A, D, and G. And that's not even a specific AC/DC song. It's just a song that sounds like AC/DC. Now we're getting onto the good stuff. Mark has arrived. Decadence Dance is a good intro. That is a riff that literally blew my mind the first time I heard it. For anyone who doesn't know, the track Decadence Dance is from the band Extreme, from their album Pornography, and the guitar player is Nuno Bettencourt. And that was one of those bands for me that I almost didn't get into because I almost didn't have the patience to sit out the intro of the album. So when I was younger, obviously we didn't really have Spotify. It was sort of music TV, or you'd have to just, know someone who knew good music to tell you what good music was. So I found a copy of the second Extreme album in my dad's CD collection, and I just thought the cover looked really cool. It was like this kind of kid stood on like a sort of a neon sort of street full of neon street signs. And I just thought that looks really cool. That looks like something that would be quite interesting. The band looked cool. They've all got long hair. So I thought, okay, I'll give this a listen. I put it in the CD player, and the first like minute and a half is just this kind of soft piano intro with rain sounds. And I instantly just remember thinking, this is not for me. I'm not into this at all. And I was semi-aware of the band because I'd always seen Nuno Bettencourt mentioned in guitar magazines, but I'd never checked the band out. And I just remember thinking, well, all the guitar magazines are going on about it, but this is like soothing rain music, and I thought, this isn't really for me. And I was literally reaching for the stop button, and then all of a sudden, I can't remember any riffs today. That's the riff. So yeah, that just kind of jumped out of the speakers literally as I was about to hit stop. And if I'd have not waited that extra 5 seconds, I would never have heard that riff, and I would never have gotten into that band. But yeah, that's a hell of a riff. And again, the groove thing is there. Bettencourt is just one of those groove guitar players. The next riff of the song is super groove. I always love how he did that. Like, there's a busyness to that. But there's that funky syncopation as well. Such a cool player. Anyone who hasn't checked out Nuno Bettencourt with Extreme should definitely go check that one out. That's such a cool riff. That was one of the big... it's a 90s riff, but I always put them in with the 80s bands. But yeah, 80s riffs, always fun. Even though I played primarily bluesy stuff, the 80s was a big part of that, and learning Maiden stuff especially, like there was a few kind of key ones there for me as well. Like I mentioned 2 Minutes to Midnight earlier, but I always loved the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner as well. And that was like when I was younger, even though it's like a 13.5-minute track, not the sort of thing I'd usually want to play, that was the first long song I became obsessed with learning. Because again, there's a groove to it. I just always loved that sort of pulsing groove that Adrian Smith had with his songwriting as well in the 80s. That was the first long song that I was like, you know what, I've got to learn 13 minutes of this. And it was way more accessible for me as a young player than learning Metallica, because if you learn Master of Puppets, it's 8 minutes of, it's like super high energy all the way through, other than like the 1 minute respite you get in the middle. But the Maiden ones kind of ebbed and flowed. So you have this big bit and then it would pull back, and you have a quiet bit, then it would get louder again. So it gave you that chance to sort of move with the song a bit more, which I always thought was cool. So bluesy, Betancourt. Yeah, Betancourt is very bluesy, even though he is, again, I guess he's put in with the shred guys, but his playing is on a different level, I think, to the typical shred playing, because he always had a groove to what he played. Even when he was playing really fast or really technical stuff, there was still a purpose to that technicality. It wasn't just like blazing through scales for, you know, for the fun of doing it. There was always that, you know, let's play cool and play fast and technical, but there's going to be a pulse to it. I kind of think Paul Gilbert was kind of the same, even though he did go deep into the shred thing at times. Riff-wise, I love Mr. Big riff growing up, like not Green Tinted 60s Mind, Daddy Brother, that's a cool riff. Haven't played that in a while, I think that was right. I mentioned Green Tinted 60s Mind just because that's the riff that destroyed my soul for a long time when I tried to learn it. But again, Paul Gilbert could write good riffs as well. He wasn't just like Betancourt, he wasn't just playing scales and notes for the sake of playing it. There was always a purpose to what those guys did, I think, which is a big part of that. When I'm asked about like easy riffs to learn, that's obviously the stuff that I stay well away from. But if people are getting into guitar, I always like to try and bring the classics in. So I think that's a good question for anyone in the chat as well. What's your favourite easy guitar riff? Because when I'm teaching, and I'm partly doing this because I want some new ideas for teaching people as well, and some new easy riffs to include in my guitar course. But for me, I have like go-tos, like Sunshine of Your Love. Obviously that's a great one to start with. Iron Man by Black Sabbath. Satisfaction by the Stones, always a good one, like Enter Sandman. But I'm always interested in what other people's favourite easy riffs are as well, because there's so many cool ones out there. So yeah, let me know what your favourite easy guitar riffs are as well, not just your favourite riffs. When I asked this question on Instagram the other day, there was some really cool results, and I'm just going to pull those up now, because some of them I was quite surprised by, because they were things I'd never heard before. So I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and some of them kind of were new riffs to me. What did we get? So we had, when I asked what people's favourite guitar riffs were, Lenny Kravitz, Are You Gonna Go My Way came up. Now that's not an easy guitar riff, but it's a cool one. That's a great riff. I always love that one. A few people actually DM me on Instagram with riffs from, I can't really pronounce this. Is it Polyphia? Does anyone in the chat know that? It's super technical stuff. It kind of went over my head a bit. But we did have a little bit of love for Maiden as well. The Wicker Man came through, and some Rat as well. Someone said they loved Rat. Round and Round. There's another band, great riffs. Usually played in drop D, but again, super fun 80s stuff. Yeah, always fun stuff to play. Favourite easy, Paranoid, just focus on perfect tone endlessly. Yeah, Paranoid is a great one. I always teach that to people just from the dexterity side of it as well. Like when you first get into grips with doing things like hammer-ons, not only have you got the hammer-ons that are contained within that chord, but also that little kind of phrase afterwards. Even though it's within the boundaries of a riff, I always think that kind of gives people their first little insight into what is essentially the start of lead guitar technique, because that kind of thing, we would use that if we were playing a guitar solo. It's the sort of thing you could take that skill set and actually put that to use. But then also you've got the down picking skill from the verse when you want to get onto playing heavy stuff as well. If you're going to go down the heavy metal or punk route, Paranoid really trains you for the down picking thing. My favourite easy riff to show people at the moment is I can't remember what it's called now. No, that's escaped me. I've lost my train of thought there. I'll come back to that one. Yeah, but yeah, I love just the idea of different easy riffs for young players as well, because I think young players these days lack the classic guitar players. So when I'm teaching younger students especially, I always like to throw these kind of riffs in, because it's like, here's what, here's the riffs that were the foundation for all the stuff you listen to. You might never have heard of Deep Purple or Black Sabbath, but these are the bands that set that up for you, So it's always fun to give young players that kind of music history as well, I think. This, things like Smoke on the Water, they're iconic riffs, but yet anyone can play them. Nothing to that. Very, very simple, very straightforward. Anyone could learn that, but it's a lot of fun to play as well, especially when you get it nailed, like tonally and rhythmically. It's really fun. John Frusciante pulls out some good riffs. He gets a bad rep though, but his riffs are not well thought out. Interesting, yeah. Do you mean his riffs are well thought out? Because that kind of came across like a compliment and an insult. in one sentence. I think I know what you mean though. He's got an interesting rhythm style. He doesn't just play like straight power chords. The Frusciante thing, it kind of comes from the Hendrix school. You can see a lot of what Hendrix did, or Hendrix's approach to rhythm, in how Frusciante plays, because the Hendrix thing was obviously taking a chord, whatever that chord is, playing it like this with a thumb, and then kind of playing the whole, like the lead lines over the top, like. That was the Hendrix thing. Frusciante wouldn't do it as complex as that, but he would use that same sort of idea. Like he's sort of playing through chords. And you're sort of adding to those chords as well. And I think even in some of the simpler stuff that Frusciante's done, he's still using that Hendrixy. There's a rhythmic thing, like there's one Chili Peppers riff that's like. I don't know if I'm playing the right notes there, but I think I'm playing the right groove. Again, there's that whole, the hands just go in. There's like a drive to it. That's very Hendrixy in its kind of approach. I remember hearing that years ago. I can't remember what the track's called, because I was never really like that into the Chili's, but I remember that riff really well though. Love the bluesy feel that Kotzen brought to the Poison riffs on the Native Tongue album. That is the most underrated Poison album. Richie Kotzen's a great player. These days he has kind of gone down the fusiony shred rabbit hole a little bit more than I would like, because I love the bluesy Kotzen stuff, but you still can't dispute the guy. He's such a good player. He's just got that. Yeah, his feel on that album was very different. Like, I love Poison, but that album was a different beast, I think. To me, Poison will always be, it'll always be that. But Kotzen did bring something very different to the table that was very interesting, I think. Don't Stop, that's the one, Chris, thank you. My memory for song titles is really bad at the moment, especially songs that I've not sort of heard for a long time. I always remember riffs or melodies, but I never remember the song title, especially because, I haven't played that riff for probably 15 years, so yeah, the song title completely eluded me there. But yeah, that's a great riff though. It's very Hendrixy in its kind of approach. Frusciante's definitely underrated in that sense. Apparently the new stuff he's doing with the Chili's is pretty cool. I haven't checked it out yet, but apparently it's pretty good. I think he's kind of back on full guitar swing at the moment, which is cool. My thump is too short. Oh, your thumb is too short. I was trying to work out what your thump was. I don't think... I know this sounds really like strange, but I don't think you really need super long thumbs to play that kind of stuff. It's more of a training thing. So I'm going to start this by saying I do have quite big hands, so I did find this playing style, again, I don't want to say easy to start with, but I didn't struggle too much to do this. But I have taught this to a lot of people who do have small hands or small thumbs, and really it's more than anything, it's a positioning thing and a comfort thing. So a lot of guitar players, I'm going to turn slightly here so you can see the back of the guitar neck. A lot of guitar players, when they play, they're going to play with their thumb in the middle of the neck. This is pretty typical. Most of you probably do this, and I do this, and it's something we're all taught at some point. Then what happens is some guitar players like me, and again some of you guys probably do this as well, you get to a point where you do this and you hold the neck with the palm of your hand, not your thumb. So really, if you're looking to integrate your thumb, even if your thumb is short, I'm guessing you probably play this way. Do that, bring your thumb up. So don't bring it all the way over, just bring it up slightly higher than you'd usually bring it and play something. Then bring it up a bit more. And gradually sort of train yourself to get used to your thumb being in that higher position. Because that's all it is. It feels weird and you feel like you don't have the reach, but that's just because your hand's not used to that position. So the more you do it, the easier it feels. Even if you start with a D chord, a regular D chord, try and get that F sharp in the bass. That's a really simple way to start using your thumb. D chord with the second fret with the thumb. And the other thing you can do is just play notes on the low E string with your thumb. So wherever your hand position is, start off with this. So my fingers are completely free at the moment. Fret a note with your thumb. And then just try and get your hand back to its, not where you've always had it, but just in a position where you feel you could play something. And over time, you'll feel that your thumb will actually get used to that position, and then doing those kind of chords will actually become a little bit more second nature. I actually find that these days I gravitate towards playing chords that way, because a lot of my favourite players like Hendrix and more modern players like John Mayer, they all do that. So when I'm learning things, that's my kind of instinctive chord shape now for those kind of things. But I also find it opens a lot of doors. So if I'm playing blues stuff, if I'm playing with my thumb over the top, it kind of frees these fingers up to do some busier stuff. So even if I'm playing rhythm, my rhythm can be busier. And all that is because I'm able to do the thing with the thumb. If I was playing the chords this way, we don't have that additional freedom and flexibility. So yeah, just start slow. Get your thumb used to actually playing some notes first of all, and then start worrying about chords. And even if all you've got to do is just first of all learn to hold that chord shape, because all the chord is it's a major chord, but we're just taking some notes out. So we're playing the root with our thumb, and then we're playing the major triad on the D, G, and B with the first, second, and third fingers. The high E string is muted by the bottom of the first finger, and then you can mute the A string either with the underside of the thumb or the tip of the third finger. If you can get used to playing that chord shape, and again, it might be quite tricky at first, start off with the triad, and then stretch the thumb over, get used to that, and then you're already half the way there to that kind of playing style. It's just getting used to the chord shape as the first hurdle. It's all about hitting all the strings and muting all but one string to get Don't Stop Swinging. Yeah, it is. That's the thing with the frusciante vibe. It's again, it's not... It's not picked like we were talking about the Keith Richards thing earlier on. It's not that. It's everything. So it's learning to mute everything other than the one string you're playing. And that is really the difference between playing something like note by note and super clean versus playing it with a bit of vibe. Because you can play one note, but you can... You don't have to play... I actually saw a really interesting like sort of live masterclass with Paul Gilbert where he talked about that. And he talked about the idea that these days guitar players all play great, like technically great, but no one has that Hendrix energy anymore. So he said in this masterclass, and I thought this was so interesting, he said when we practice scales, we don't practice scales like rock stars, we practice scales like this. Which is the right way to practice a scale. What he said is we should practice scales by playing all 6 strings at the same time, but only playing the note that we want to play, so everything else is muted. So you play your scale like this. I thought that was completely fascinating because he's kind of right. Like if you look at guys like Hendrix play, Hendrix isn't going like this. Hendrix is going like that. I thought, well, that's a really cool way to think about it because you're practicing scales as if you're performing. So yeah, it's a good way to think about that. Again, frusciante way of playing. It's a completely different methodology to running a scale in a clean way. You are kind of going out of your way to make it slightly more difficult, but you're bringing that vibe and that kind of showmanship to your playing while still practicing the scale. And obviously I wouldn't recommend practicing everything that way, but it's a cool thing to have in your trick bag. You know, if you're on stage and you've got your big guitar solo coming up, you don't really want to be going, you want to be going and you actually want to play it like a guitar player. Totally different hand muscles, hold the root. Yeah, that's it, Rusty. It's all about getting that thumb nailed in. The thumb thing gets tough on the ultra-wide flat Ibanez Wizard necks. Yeah, it does. It's a playing style that kind of evolved from the more vintage style guitars. So it lends itself really well to Strats. But when you start talking about things like Ibanez necks, and admittedly this guitar is quite hard to do it on because this isn't the same neck profile as the Ibanez thing, but this is a wide neck. So this guitar is quite wide, quite flat, but it's got a little bit of mass to it. It's not super thin, but it's definitely wider across the board than other Strats that I have. So I agree. I found this guitar the hardest one to... I essentially had to relearn how to do it on this guitar because the instinctive thing is it just didn't feel right because it's slightly wider than what I'm used to. Whereas guys like Hendrix and John Mayer and all those guys that do that technique on a daily basis, they play it on vintage Strats which have a much more rounded radius. What makes it hard on a wider neck guitar is that we have more of a pronounced corner to the fretboard. So the fretboard kind of edges off more because it's essentially a flatter board. On a vintage radius, the board it's almost circular because the board has got such a pronounced curve here that this edge isn't as harsh, so it allows the thumb to sit a bit more naturally. Whereas when the fretboard is flatter, you've got to get more of an angle on your thumb, which makes it feel slightly harder to do. That's exactly the reason. So yeah, it's the sort of playing style that doesn't really lend itself that well to modern guitars. It's possible, but it's slightly harder because the mechanics of the guitar sort of prevent it in a way. Vibe equals ghost notes. Yeah, ghost notes are underrated. Everyone should use ghost notes, whether intentionally or accidentally. I play a ton of them. I'm maybe not intentionally, but I'm always hitting something I shouldn't be hitting, especially on stage, because usually you don't pay attention. And sometimes that's where the vibe comes from, is just letting it be a bit loose. I think, and I teach this a lot to students I teach either through one-to-one lessons or through my course. I always teach people that you don't have to play everything perfectly. The guitar is an instrument that lends itself really well to not being played perfectly. If you, again, to go back to the Keith Richards idea that we talked about earlier, if you play Satisfaction by the Stones and you play this, it sounds correct in that I'm playing the right notes and the right melody. But if I lean into the ghost notes a bit and I kind of lose a bit of regard for technically correct playing, it becomes a lot more exciting. And this is something I really try to get across in everything I teach with people. It's sometimes the vibe is more important than the technicality, and you need to think about how what you're playing sounds, sometimes rather than what you're playing being correct. So you can play the right notes, but if you're playing the right notes and they're sterile, it's not fun for you and it's not fun for the people listening. So sometimes you've got to learn it and then abandon what you've learned and just kind of let the guitar kind of do it for you. You know, the guitar's kind of play it the way it wants to be played. It's not an instrument that needs to be played perfectly. We're not playing, you know, classical music pieces here. We're playing rock. So we can be loose. We can have fun with it. We can, you know, if we're playing an A chord, we can play it like this, or we can play like that. And I know which one of those is more fun to play on stage. You don't want to sort of come across that way, like too sort of technically minded, I think. Obviously there's a time and place for technicality. We all know that. There's plenty of players who are insanely good technical players. I'm more of a vibe player. Personally, I've always just been more interested in the vibe of playing something rather than the precision of playing it. But it's all about what works for that individual person. Vibe lends all the style to your playing. Yeah, it does. It actually does. Vibe is the style that, it's the thing that differentiates each player as well, because anyone can learn a series of notes and a series of patterns, but it's using those notes and patterns to move people or to create a feeling. And that's what you can't do if you play everything by the book. And again, that's why I sort of try and teach that through my guitar course, because it's easy to say to someone, let's just play the notes that are written down. But sometimes it's how you play the notes or what you play between the notes. And by between the notes, I mean the things you don't play, or the things like the ghost notes that, you know, the things that kind of happen to the guitar as a result of you just being in that moment. So yeah, I think it's something that a lot of players overlook for some reason. I don't know why, because there are tons of technically awesome players, but there's only so much technicality I think that music can take before it becomes too sterile. And Chris says, especially in a band. Yeah, absolutely, especially in a band. That's one thing I've learned more than anything else as a gigging guitar player, is sometimes showing up to a gig, and I do a lot of gigs where I show up without knowing who I'm playing with sometimes, so I'll meet the band for the first time at the show. And sometimes it's not about being the best player in the room, it's about being the player that can fit in with everyone else. So my thing that I always do whenever I'm working with a new band, especially on a gig that I've never played with them before, is when we're sound checking, I'll listen to the drummer and I'll think, right, how is this guy playing? What's he grooving to? What's he kind of locking into? And if we're playing to a click, I'll listen to the click in my ears and the drummer and think, okay, is he behind the click? Is he ahead of the click? And I'll kind of change my playing vibe to lock in with him. And that's sometimes more important than just saying, do you know what, I'm just going to play loads of scales and prove that I can play the technical stuff. So sometimes the vibe, especially with other musicians, is so important. That's what, you know, makes a band have that energy, I think, is that they can click together in that way. It's, again, something people don't think about. People just think about the technical stuff. They don't think about the vibe of what they play. So yeah, very, very important. That's the thing I learned about all the riffs that I loved growing up as well. They all had a vibe to them. Like every riff I ever learned as a guitar player when I was younger, there was just a vibe to it. I grew up on simple classic rock. We talk like Led Zeppelin. That's a prime example of a riff that should not be played tight, because you can play that really technically correct and you can go, but now we've taken all the groove out of it. And if you watch videos of Page playing that, he's kind of alternate picking that low string, really, really sloppy, but that's what gives the riff its groove. That's the vibe thing there. You can get away with that, and that's something that I really kind of focused on when I was younger, was just nailing those little kind of intricacies, that bend in the second note. Yeah. He actually... I actually do play this slightly wrong. I will admit this, because what Page does is Page actually bends up, and he hits the fifth of the A, which is the D note, with the open D string, which is obviously the same note, and he bends it up slightly, like a quarter tone, which creates this slight sort of dissonance, and that's part of the riff sound. I always bend it down, and I don't play the open D, which I know is wrong. I know that's wrong, but I learned it that way, and it's so hardwired into me that I can't quite get my head out of it, unfortunately. But it's such a cool thing, and Page is great with that. It's always the interesting notes that he would always choose to land on. That was my favourite thing with Jimmy Page. I love that he would always pick interesting notes that you wouldn't expect him to finish up on. Like in the intro for Since I've Been Loving You. It's this riff where he lands on this G sharp note. You would never land on that note. But Page, for some reason, gravitates towards those very strange notes, which is very interesting. And yeah, old habits. I've got tons of them. I'm the worst person for having bad habits, which annoys me sometimes, because I try and teach people how to have the best habits, and I've got plenty myself, because it's just, you know, when you've been playing for a long time, you stick to habits, and you fall into old things. I'm always trying to get out of my bad habits, though, and I'm getting better at it. I used to play like super aggressively, like fretting really hard and picking, like really like as hard as I possibly could, and I'm getting better with that, because as I've gotten older, I realised there's so much more dynamic with the guitar. Like, you don't have to play like that all the time. Sometimes you can play like that a little bit and sort of save 20% of your energy for when you need it as well. But it is very easy to go all in sometimes. But yeah, it's always fun part of the journey, isn't it? Just kind of working out what your habits are, and you know, where your strengths and weaknesses are. Jeff Beck influence. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Page got some of the weird stuff from Beck, because obviously Beck is just, you know, a league unto his own. The thing that Beck does really well, and I can literally see you've just mentioned it now, is the whole like outside playing thing. It's when you play notes that you're not necessarily expecting to hear, and then you take them to notes you are expecting to hear, and that's something that Jeff Beck did very well. So a good kind of example of that for anyone who's never seen that kind of playing before is if you're just playing like blues, rock, whatever you're playing, and you're thinking pentatonic. I instinctively added an outside note there. Start one note lower sometimes. And it can unlock just so many interesting textures and sort of tones that you're not hanging on those notes. Because if you hang on some of those notes, like let's say I'm playing an A, and I'm coming down the pentatonic scale, and I hit that note, then we're in trouble, because that note, the flat 5, is not a nice note to hang on. But if I hit the flat 5 and I resolve it back up to the 5 or down to the 4, now we're talking. So don't hang on those weird notes, but that's something Beck would do very well, is he'd pick a note that would cause this clash, and then he would just pull it back and take it to where it needs to be. He would do a lot of that with the trem as well. So he would actually sometimes play those wrong notes and use the tremolo arm to bend them into pitch as well, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do, because you have to have super tight hearing and sort of pitch reception for that, because you've actually got to be able to hear that semitone bend. When we do a string bend, it's easier because we've kind of got the distance measurement of our fingers. We kind of know the distance we need to bend to get that note. But with a tremolo, it's a completely different ball game. And he would do a lot of that, where he would play a note and he would almost play scalic stuff, like... and you're targeting like... It's so hard to do that consistently, but Beck is the master of that. There's no one that can do that quite like Jeff Beck. He really is like a pitch icon, I guess we could call him, for that kind of thing. He does have a very unique style. And with him, he's such an angry player as well. It's always... he's never doing, you know, B.B. King. He's always... it's always super digging and... lots of aggressive vibrato and everything as well. And that actually, that fits in with the vibe thing we were saying earlier. Sometimes it's how you play a note. Like, you could be playing a lead line and you can play... and that sounds really nice, it's very smooth. But if I'm angry, I can play it and kind of dig into it a bit more and create a different kind of feeling with it. I think that's the thing that guys like Beck and Page and all those, they've just got that down because they just know how to create that kind of feeling in people, I think. It's very interesting. It's one of my favourite things about studying my favourite guitar players, is that you do kind of go into this rabbit hole of like, right, what are they doing to make that note sound that way? Like, I know that the note they're playing, I can see the notes on paper, I can see what they're doing, but I can't make it sound that way. And that is an insanely fun rabbit hole to go down. I actually did a guitar lesson for guitar.com in their magazine last year about Jeff Beck, actually. And Beck was one of the guys that, as much as I liked Beck, I never dived too much into his playing style when I was growing up. I was always more into the straighter blues guys like your Clapton, Page, Hendrix. Beck was always a little bit, as much as I appreciated him as a player, I didn't learn how to play like him. So when I did that lesson, I was like, wow, this is like, it really like threw me a little bit, because I was doing things that I'd never thought about as a guitar player, using the guitar in different ways, like using the tremolo to target pitch, you know, like being a child of the 80s. For me, the Floyd Roses, that's what it's for, you know. And sometimes you might go subtle, but really the trem for me was more of an add-on to my playing. But Beck, it is his playing. It's that whole... it's like using it to actually find notes. That was completely alien to me to learn. So yeah, super fun though. I kind of wish I'd learned that sooner, because I think it might have been a really fun thing to build into my playing over time. But yeah, maybe I need to sit down and study some Beck stuff. He's not a player I've sat down and listened to too much, so I think I need to do that. I think I need to actually just sit down and go through some of his discography. But I always loved that that track ain't superstitious. What a cool riff. Again, there's that aggression there. He's really digging in on that vibrato. He's one of those guys that had that really wide... And I always loved that he played the octave chord in that instead of the power chord. It almost gave it this slightly dissonant kind of vibe. It almost like you kind of feel like he's going to play something that's going to clash, but it doesn't quite. So yeah, very, very cool. Got a lot of time for that. Very cool guitar player. Like I said, I was always just more into the bluesier guys, but yeah, I do think I need to give Beck that attention. He's a good riff writer. Very good riff writer. Very kind of expressive guitar player as well, which is cool. And he's easily in your top 5 favourite guitar players. He didn't quite make mine, but I do know a lot of my friends are huge Beck fans. Yeah, there are a lot of guys I know that just would rate him in the same kind of ballpark as you. Didn't or doesn't he use a magnetic ring to pull notes? Oh, I don't know. That's really interesting. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised if he had some cool tricks like that. Yeah, maybe that could be a fun discussion in its own right. Because yeah, I don't know. I don't actually know the answer to that question. James Severin, hey, what's going on? Hey James, how's it going? Not too much here. We're just hanging out, talking about riffs and guitar players and all. We're going down a guitar geek rabbit hole. So feel free to talk about your favourite riffs and whatnot in the comments, because we've been focusing on riffs today, but we've gone off on a few different tangents. So if you've got a favourite riff that you'd like to talk about, throw it in the comments and we'll talk about it. Philippe, am I too late? No, we're still here. We're still going. I don't know how long we're going to go on. We've been going about an hour and a half so far, but you know, we can keep things going if people want to chat. I've got nowhere to be, so if you guys want to talk for a bit longer, we can carry on. So yeah, we've been talking on and off about guitar riffs. I've shared a few of my favourites. I've not really gone into like a top 5 or top 10 or whatever as such, but I've just kind of shared a few moments from my kind of musical upbringing that I found interesting, and I thought you guys might find some concepts interesting, and people have shared some of their favourites with me as well. But yeah, we can talk about whatever we want anyway. That's the good thing with this. There's no rules. But yeah, riff wise, Jeff Beck, definitely interesting. Wasn't quite my guy, but he's, you know, his career speaks for itself, doesn't it? So what about you guys, James and Philip? Riffs, what are your favourite riffs? Let's hear some stuff from you guys. What kind of riffs get you guys excited and ready to go every time you hear them? Because there's been a huge range of input from people actually, there's been some really interesting riff choices. So we've had everything from, you know, Black Sabbath's Paranoid through to Black Dog by Zeppelin through to, you know, Rage Against the Machine Kill in the Name Of. We've had Megadeth mentioned, so a huge range of stuff. And I think that's just such an interesting topic, is finding out what riffs get every individual guitar player excited. Because I know my favourite riffs are very wide-ranging. At the moment, a riff that I'm finding that I'm playing a lot is there's a John Mayer riff that I learned this riff quite a few years ago, but I've kind of rediscovered the riff from a playing perspective, which is this riff. And at the moment I'm playing that all the time, every time I pick a guitar up, because I really like just a slightly different vibe. It's not just like playing, you know, power chords or whatever. It's actually a sort of, how do we put this? It's sort of like a finger-picked riff with a percussive thing going on, but also a melody. And I think this is why I like this, because it's kind of quite a challenging one. So I quite like trying to do multiple things at the same time to try and kind of bend my perception of what I think I know. And this riff is chordally, like the left hand is doing nothing. It's doing D major, B minor, F sharp minor, G major, then it's going to that chord, which is a D chord. Couldn't work that out then. To an A. It's sort of doing that. But over the top you're going... There's like a percussive thing. And then, because he's John Mayer, he's adding this melody to it. It's one of those really annoying riffs that if you think about it, you can't play it, because you're doing 3 different things at the same time. So the only way to play this correctly is to not think about it. And now I'm thinking about it. I can't play it now because I'm thinking about it, but yeah, that's that kind of thing I'm playing a lot at the moment. Riffs, polyphia stuff, and lately been listening to everything and everything from blues to metal. I briefly mentioned polyphia earlier because we were talking about riffs that are just like super technical and super advanced. For me, I can't kind of get my head around that playing style. It sort of doesn't really do much for me, but when I see people play it, it's like, it's super impressive, especially the polyphia thing, because they play a lot of clean tones as well, so it's like super clean sounding. There's no grit on the guitar at all, but yet the technicality that goes into it is mind-blowing. It's not the sort of riff that I sort of play myself, but as from a technical standpoint, it's insane. So your next go-to riff is John Mayer Neon. Do you know what? I've been trying to get my head around that riff now for probably 3 or 4 years. It's not a riff that I sit down and play every day, but maybe like once every few months I'll come back and think, I'm going to learn that, and I'm going to learn it properly, and I'll sit down and I'll start, and then after like 30 minutes I'm like, nope. And the reason I can't get my head around it is there's one chord, there's the final chord. It's this chord. Obviously, I'm playing this with the guitar in standard tuning, but on the record he's got the low E drop down to a C. So he's sort of doing this chord shape, which is kind of like it's a triad. It's a sus2, a C sus2 triad, and he's playing this note in the bass, but it's not a D note. It'll be down 4 semitones. So it should be that, if I've worked that out correctly. But he plays it with his thumb, and the chord shape just, I cannot compute this chord shape in my head, because you've got to play your thumb on the 10 of the E, your third finger on the 10 of the D, your index finger on the 7 of the G, and your middle finger on the 8 of the B. And I just cannot get that chord shape to be natural. You can play it this way, but because the chord shape before it is that, it's such a weird change that I just cannot kind of get my head around that one. So that's a Mayer one that I'll come back to on and off for a long time, I think. Robo Thump, yeah, because again, he's got, his thumb is insanely long, and he's got this, he did a really interesting video on this on his TikTok page, where he talks about the picking technique of it, and every tab shows it as a series of notes, which makes it look harder than the way he makes it look. And the reason he makes it look easier is because he actually talks about the picking as just being, there's this kind of groove where you're playing the low string with a thump, the G, the D, and the B. So he's doing this kind of thing, but fast. And he's kind of accenting the first one. And it's that kind of thing, but I can't get it to sound clean, but somehow he manages to do it. And yeah, orthopedically impossible for regular humans. I think I've got most of the other Mayor stuff down, but that one is just, I can't get that. Not yet anyway. I think I maybe need to get an extra like 2 inches added onto my thumb. Maybe I'll save up and try and make that happen. But yeah, for now, I think that's just going to be on my kind of burner list of things that I just can't quite get. The rest of the Mayor stuff, though, I love. I love his use of, again, it's the Hendrixy thing. I always loved the riff for Who Did You Think I Was? Let's get a bit more gain on that. That's a cool riff as well. A lot of groove to that. He uses cheat codes. I think he does. I think he has access to some information as a guitar player that the rest of us don't have. Whatever that information is, he has access to it, and he should share it with the rest of us, I think. Because some of his stuff comes across like, you know, yeah, that's fine, I could play that. That's fairly easy. And you see other things that he does and you think, yeah, I don't even have a chance of playing that in the slightest. Because when I got into him, I learned all the melodic stuff, like your sort of... I can't remember anything today. Why can't I remember how to play that? But yeah, I learned all those kind of things first, all the super melodic ones, and then kind of started to go down the technical rabbit hole. I got to Neon and I thought, yeah, this is probably where I reach my limit. Rusty knows the cheat code, so Rusty's just shared it. So if anyone tries to apply the John Mayer cheat code to their own playing and it works or doesn't work, let me know, because I'd love to hear if that actually works. But Rusty seems to have that, so Rusty, if it doesn't work, it's on you, my friend. He definitely is a guitar player, though, that can do things that a lot of other players can't. His style is interesting because it kind of comes from, it's a combination of like the Hendrix thing with Stevie Ray Vaughan, with a bunch of other sort of influences and sensibilities creeped in from different places. So yeah, such an interesting player. You can hear so many different things in his playing style. I think that's what makes him quite unique. And a lot of people will, you know, dismiss him because he's not a metal player, but you can't deny the guy can play a bit of guitar. Whether you like him or not, he's a great player. Yeah, Rusty's accepting responsibility there for the cheat code. Is DNA code? Technically, yeah. Technically, I guess he was... I was going to say he was born with it, but he is actually a very, very educated and schooled guitar player. He went to... was it Berkeley? I think, the big one up in Boston. So he knows what he's doing as well. That's kind of what makes it even scarier, because he not only does he have this amazing grasp on the kind of authenticity of his playing, like he can play like a true guitar player, but he knows what he's doing as well. He knows those chords and he knows the notes. So underneath the vibe of his playing, there is the information. So yeah, it's like a double-edged sword. I think that's how he was able to come up with such interesting stuff like Neon, because he was able to think about chords and think about note choices as being something slightly outside the box. And maybe that's the cheat code. Maybe if we all go to Berkeley and study there for a few years, maybe we can all do it too. I think that's the expensive cheat code. I don't think a Berkeley scholarship is the most affordable thing. But yeah, good old John. He knows what he's doing. So yeah, that was fun. Thank you guys for hanging out for so long. It's we're sort of creeping up to the 2-hour mark now, so I think we should probably, you know, part ways now and let everyone get on with their evenings. It's getting quite late here over in the UK, and I'm sure wherever you guys are watching from, obviously there's going to be drastically different time zones. So yeah, thank you guys as always for hanging out. That was a lot of fun. That's actually the longest live stream we've done so far on the channel. All the other ones have kind of topped off at about an hour and a half. And yeah, we got quite close to the 2 hour mark there, 1 hour and 47. So yeah, thank you guys for sticking around. And a few of you guys have been here pretty much since the start as well, which is very cool. I appreciate that massively. As always, there's a ton of new content coming on the channel. Last week I mentioned at the end of the stream that I've not posted as many videos on YouTube recently because I've been super busy editing. For anyone who hasn't seen yet, I do have my own guitar course, which is linked down there somewhere in the description. And I launched it last year, but I've been reshooting and re-editing all the videos again, basically because it's good, but I wanted it to be better, so I spent the last 3 months basically reshooting everything, and I'm in the middle of this editing black hole right now. So I'm nearly done, so then I can start upping the videos on the channel, but there's still a ton of stuff coming, so keep watching. There's a ton of gear demos coming. I've got loads of pedals in ready for the channel. There's a bunch of other stuff on the way as well, so yeah, keep a watch out for all that. As always, if you guys want to support the channel in any way, obviously there's a bunch of links down below. You can do that as well. Every sort of level of support you guys do is massively appreciated, whether it's just, you know, sharing it with your friends on social media or signing up to something down below in the description. Everything helps. Everything helps me keep doing this and keep building and keep pushing. And obviously I couldn't do these things without you guys hanging out here with me as well, so thank you as always. I'm gonna let you guys get on with your evening now. So yeah, thank you for sticking around, thank you for hanging out, and I will see you guys soon. Check out some of the links down below in the description, and I'll catch you guys next week. Be back on next Wednesday. Don't know what we're going to talk about yet, but if there's anything you want me to talk about, let me know. Throw it down below. We can talk about whatever we want. So yeah, I will see you guys next week. And Rusty, yes, we do. We've got to get the viewers up. Share this with your friends. Bring your friends along. Tell all your friends about the channel and the live streams as well, because just get everyone to come hang out and talk guitar, because that's what this is all about. It's just, you know, sharing information, talking about guitar, having fun. So yeah, if you've got any friends who would enjoy this, bring them along as well. And that goes for you too, Rusty. Make sure you bring your friends along as well. But yes, thank you guys as always. I appreciate the support and all of you guys being here, taking the time out of your evenings to hang out. I'll see you guys next week.